it's something that is an aspect of the psychological work, looking into. Basically, all I can say in reference to what people might be familiar with what I've already done is that this is a situation in which it arises out of the concept of the inauthentic self. We've talked about this in other writings and presentations about man living an inauthentic life. And of course there's different degrees of inauthentic life. It's like a spectrum. Some people are, getting it together, they're not so bad. They're looking deeply at different reasons, you see, why they're not in selfhood, why they don't have strong boundaries, why life isn't working for them, and they're getting with it and they're progressing, and every day is a new day of adventure and discovery. So they're not quite as bad, They're looking for the authentic life, which is of course connected to a man's selfhood, the purpose and reason of why he's here. And then, as I've shown in my work on pathology and how it works with the conspiracy, you have the other end of the spectrum of basically the self-murdered person. This is somebody who has no spirit at all, going not with a religious idea or interpretation of spirit, but with a psychological idea of spirit, which is that spirit is not something you're given at birth. It's not something you come into this world with. It's something you create for yourself through the experiences that you have. Soul, spirit, is something you develop yourself. It's like that you bring alive from within yourself. You're given the spark of life by the Almighty intelligence, but spirit is something you gain from your experiences here in this world. Just as everything else in your body grows from a natal state into maturity, so does your spiritual self. It's not just installed at the moment of birth and there you have it. But unfortunately there are people who either because of, again, terrible violations that happen to them in this life, or just some other warped psychological reasoning, you see, are self-murdered. And we have these emotionally self-murdered people in their millions walking around. In fact, if we really showed the statistics, we'd probably be horrified at just how many people, you see, are not living in they're not alive in a moral or spiritual sense. They just have the mask, they just have the persona. And then these individuals are very adept at living off the energies and light of other people. So that's why the term vampirism has been used. It's quite an accurate term, actually, in many ways. And it also ties into this whole idea of the figures that we find at the top of the hierarchy, who would be so toxic, like we mentioned in the previous interview we did, that the problem with these people is that, see, they're also self-murdered, they're also toxic, and therefore they require not only the false religion as a front, as a cover, as some sort of sham to hang on to give the, just like you put marzipan on a cake, just like you put a false mask on somebody, they require this because they don't have any of the real light. They don't have any of the real spiritual energy, so they require a sort of counterfeit camouflage, just like the tiger hides in the long grass. And also they very much require status. They require the power that they have over other people, not power over the self, because they don't have any power over the self. There is no selfhood. The self has been murdered, self-murdered. These are deeply self-sadistic people, and therefore, they require the outer trappings of control and power. And of course, it goes thousands of years ago, back to the Taoists and Taoists and the great philosophers. They always spoke about that the man who has true power doesn't require any control over other people. So the very manic need for these people to set up these exploitatory edifices, as we said, corporations are psychopathic, meaning the controllers, the people who create all sorts of corporations. I believe there's a great deal of psychopathy behind these different fraternal orders. Maybe not the street level masonry, but certainly on the higher levels. My goodness, if you study these orders as much as I have, it goes without saying that there's a psychopathy there. You see? So it just like any corporation, just like any organization, and just like any individual who has great status, who absolutely, literally will jump through hoops to have the world bestow physical awards, physical medals, physical honors, and so on and so forth. You see, physical wealth, because they have no wealth within. So you also meet this on the more, let's say, street level, humble level of people walking around you. And of course, you won't notice it. These are people, you can't pull out a meter with a nice little needle that will, like some sort of, tricorder out of Star Trek or something like that, where happily and beautifully and luckily, Mr. Spock will be able to go, watch out, Captain, psychic vampire loose. And everybody can have their, boundaries up. Unfortunately, people are married to such individuals. People work beside them every day of their lives. People give birth to such creatures. People have them as neighbors. People have them as superiors. And unfortunately, there is no meter. And the only meter that you have is your own intuition and your own deductive abilities to observe them very closely to find out, okay, is there something slightly different here? But of course, this kind of knowledge, you see, is very absent in the world. And we're still at a sort of a spinner rack level of psychology when it comes to analyzing these kinds of people. Psychology does know about them to a degree, but it is very paltry. It's not in depth yet, not too much. And so there's a lot we need to know about this kind of, person and how they might operate and how this kind of vampirism works on all of its different levels. And this is what, education I'm committed to. Very fascinating subject. And as I said, we do have a meter. We do have the ability. These people will betray themselves, but we have to be observant of that fact. And in the study of the psychic vampire, we're actually studying humanity. Because as I said, it's deconstructive. Once you understand what a human being is not, you have a greater understanding of maybe what a human being is. By the analysis of what it is not, all the various corrupt forms, you see, all the various counterfeit forms, once those are analyzed and discarded, like we said in the previous interview, once you've eliminated the untrue, you'll be left with a sense of the true. And this is essential in some of these studies that have to do with the inauthentic life, with the systems of control, tying in exactly to what we said last time about the inability of a psychopath to see hierarchy. Well, you see, the psychopath will simply not see it. So no matter where they look, they will see hierarchy. And that is already, and the fact that they're adamant about it is the sign of their dementia. So it's just like a person who's got Parkinson's, it's no point expecting them to be able to, hold the knife and fork. Unfortunately, the body functions just don't allow for that. So in exactly the same way as a physical ailment will preclude somebody from climbing the stairs or cooking a meal, or bathing themselves. So in exactly the same way as a mental disease is the same sort of, hindrance. It's just not possible, for a person with one leg, to beat the 4-minute mile. It's just not possible. So in a physical disability, we understand it, but with a mental disability, we don't understand it. But we need to start understanding that people with that kind of a disability are not going to be clear and deep in their understanding of the nature of the universe. It's simply not possible. Their understanding of life, their projections upon other people, their understandings of other people's motives, their understanding of how the systems of the world work are going to be deeply flawed. These are not rational people, and I don't care how many university degrees they happen to have. That has no bearing upon the facts at all. If a person is demented, they can still be intelligent enough to jump through hoops to get some worldly awards. In fact, this is what you often find with people who are megalomaniacs. They do possess enough skill to be able to, manipulate people and to go along to get along in the school situation, or maybe win awards politically, you see, so that they end up getting power, because these people want power more than any other thing. So they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to do hard work, they're willing to manipulate and worm their way up, until they have an actual sense of power. This turns them on. This is very, very important to most of the potentates and the criminal syndicates of the world, you see, who operate in such a sadistic manner, not caring how much genocide, how much mayhem, how much misery they bring to the world. Again, if we do not know how to isolate a psychopath, that's about as good as not being able to identify a mad tiger hiding in the long grass who's ready to just eat all your sheep and kill your children and abduct and murder and just go mad. Some wild, crazed out beast. You're in exactly the same predicament. And this is unfortunately where we find ourselves today.